וכי נפשי אס השם
Today, on page 98 in Tractate Shabbat, those of you who are structural engineers, building engineers, or people who deal with all kind of building issues, find, I think, this page very interesting. In general, the subject is for sure the carrying, which is our subject for relatively long time. But here we're talking about roof, connectedness between the pieces, how we define in a structure of a building the arrangements of putting together the pieces, especially in the tabernacle it was a wood pieces, and then we juxtapose that to Hilchot Shabbat in nowadays. In other words, we speak about the structure of the tabernacle and the other maintenance part of tabernacle, and since we learn all the halachot of Shabbat, the 39 halachot from the tabernacle, so therefore there is a lot of halachic, practical halachic derivative from this session. Page 98, 3 lines from the top of the page. Amar Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda Amar Rav Abba Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav. One rabbi speak on the name of the other, which means it is a tradition that handed over. 4 אמות ברשות הרבים מקורה פטור. If there is a one carry in 4 cubits in the area, in a public domain that it's covered, he is exempt. Why? לפי שאינו דומה לדגלי מדבר, because it's not similar to the flags that the children of Israel, the Israelites, had the time that they are in the wilderness, which were not covered. So let's understand. The Torah tells us, in the time the children of Israel wander in the desert, so at that time they have the tabernacle, and they have certain part of that tabernacle that connected to those wheels. It was 4 wheels that the sons of Merari used to carry. The tribe of Levi, who is in charge for the tabernacle, has 3 sons. One of them name is Merari, and his job as an integral part of the tribe of Levi is to carry those wheels. It was 4 wheels to the tabernacle, etc. Now, each one has their own flags, and each one of them has their own designation of a job. So those 4 wheels, just give you some introduction, have 48 krashim, 48 wood pieces. Now, how it works? It was 20, 20, and 8, which means each wood part has 10 amot, 10 hand breadth, and the other part was 1.5 hand breadth, and the in between the ovi, the middle part, the one that they carried, was 1 amah. So if you take this agala, this wheel, the Torah said that they have 5 amot rochav, it was 5 handbreadth in the weight, and 2.5 in the other one, and they have those krashim, those wood part on the top of those wheels. Now it was an arrangement of the beams when they place on the wheat. It was a special arrangement, so they hold it properly. Now those wheels go by pair, 2 and 2 pairs. So again we have 20, 20, and 8, so it's altogether 48. So now we said that if someone carried, that's what they said, that one carries an object 4 cubits in the public domain that it's covered. So since they have that roof, soon you see how it's connected to the wheels. So if they have that roof, then it's fine, you know. So is exempt. Why? because he said that's the way they do it at the time of the tabernacle. Now, here is the big challenge. The Gemara said, Hini, is that true? That if someone carries in the place that is a public domain while they have a roof on the top of that building, but it's still considering a public domain, it's okay, it's exempt. והעגלות דמקורות הוויין, those wheels which just discuss. So what happened to them? Those wheels that they carry this קרשי המשכן, the beam part in the tabernacle, דמקורות הוויין, because they have this type of beams that place in both in the depth and in the width, and is the way wide. ואמר רב משום רבי חייא, because what happened is Moses gave to the son of Merari from that which is called Nadavat Nesiim, whatever the Nesiim left, 4 wheels to carry that beam part. So now they went in a pair, and since the space between each wheel was 5 handbreadth, so under the wheel, it's the spot. Those of you who have Gemarot, that they have pictures, so you see under those wheels, they have those spot that was the bottom of the wheel, and it's called Tachtehem, under those wheels. Beinehem, in between, is the 5 handbreadths between the wheel to the one next. Tzidehem, so from the width and the place of the depth, from the width to the depth, that's the other part. So because that was so they hold, the Gemara hold that this rochav, this width that they hold, it's hold the entire wheel. If you look carefully, I don't know how many of you have Gemarot with pictures, but you may share. So you see that wheel, they have for the entire piece that beam. It's hold the whole part. So it means that the place that those wheels were standing, all that part was covered with different beams, with those beams, right? So therefore, ואמר רב משום רב חייא עגלות תחתיהם וביניהם וצידיהם רשות הרבים. That he said the area beneath those wagons and between those wagons and on the side of those wagons, so all considering what? A public domain. So it means, what we derive from that, since we learn everything from the time that they did in a tabernacle, so now we understand that even an area that it's covered, it's considering a public domain. For example, the space beneath the wagon is a status of what? Of public domain. So now it challenged to what we said earlier. What we said earlier, that we compare it to the Diglei Midbar, to the flags in the desert, and that's the sons of Merari did, and in that place it was okay, and it was in a sense, they said that as long as it's have the roof, it's fine. So the Gemara responded and said, no. Let's explain it. Ki ka'amar Rav. What did Rav say? That under, beneath those wagons, it's considering what? A public domain. And Maharsha explained why we're specifically dealing with under the wheels. Bedra'ata. It was in a space that you arrange those stocks, which means that it's a space between the lines of those beams, that those spot was not covered. Since we said that it was 48 pieces of wood, beams, 20 to the north, 20 to the south, 6 to the west, 1 at the corner of west north, and 1 at the corner of south west. So all together, according to what the Torah said in Shmot Kafei, that the Exodus 28, So it's 48. So they put together on those 4 wheels 12 beam pieces in each wheel. So, and there you have a special lines that they put together though. So in each line have several beam pieces that they are connected in a way that the one at the top of the others. So it was a space. If you look carefully, those who have pictures, you see a space between the lines. So Rashi said, and that space under those empty area, that it was not covered with the beams, that Rav hold that's considering Reshut Rabim, that's considering a public domain. Why? Because it's a space and it wasn't covered. So therefore, the part between the floor of that wheel, it's and that space is considering uncovered. It's empty space. So now we digging in, and we said, and again, please understand the mindset. The mindset here in this sugya is the whole idea that if someone, in a practical manner, in our times, go to a public domain, while that area is covered with some type of roof, that's the question: is he considering going, or carrying in the public domain or not? And we derive from that, like everything, from the tabernacle. So now we need to go to details to understand what exactly happened in a tabernacle, since we all derive from that point. Okay? So they said, Mikdei orka de agala kama havai. After all, how much was the length of the wagon? So they said, Chamesh amin. It was 5 cubits. I'm sorry if I said early 100. It's 5 cubits. Putya de keresh kama havai. What is the size of the width of the beam? Amta upalga, 1.5 cubit. Kama motiv, what is the line? They have a place in the wagon. So how many beams could one have on one wagon? So they said plata, which means because there is limit room on that wagon, so you need to have only 3 and not more from the 5 of each width of those wagon, which altogether, if you count the number, it's a 4.5 cubits. So that's Rashi said that's the maximum space you can have. Pashale palga de amta. So now you take half a cubit of open space. It remain. Kishadele mar beinei o beinei. If you put some distribute a cubit between the stacks of the beams, so now you have an issue with kelavudame. You remember we said what we said about lavud? You remember we studied lavud? We said that anything below than 3 tfachim, it's considering lavud. Okay? So in that sense, if it's in a state of lavud, so the space between each stack is less than 3 tfachim, handbreadth. So if it's less than 3 tfachim, it's considering those space as it's fully occupied, which means it's not considering a space. The space starts with the size of lavud, which anything above then 3 handbreadth. Is that clear? That's the din of lavud. So what we learn, that all the space under those, all the air under those space, it's considering like they have a roof. Again, why? Because what's left over, if we measure all the size of those pieces and the wagon and the size together and everything, it turns that any space you have in between is below than 3 handbreadth, which means that is in a size of lavud. But because it's in a size of lavud, therefore that area is considering mekurei. It's like they have it covered. So now what we see here that the question we asked earlier, that Rav said that under those wagon it's considering a public domain, even it's basically everything has a roof.
Weren't the wagons considered a private domain now? Reshut Yachid? And they
Why?
say because when they were handing the boards, they were handing it from one private domain to the other over a public domain.
It's a good question, but think together with me. In all together, it's only in the public domain. Those wagons themselves, it has to have an entity, you're right. But that entity, in that sense, you can consider in that manner private domain. But since they move them and they have a certain purpose, they use it for the tabernacle, so it's all wrapped up as a public domain. In other words, hypothetically speaking, if you have a huge wagon and someone in ancient times sleeping under those wagons, okay, and make it like a little whatever hut house, a little whatever sukkah, something like that. But since the use of those wagons was basically for the tabernacle in the wilderness, then those wagons it's wrapped up with all the category of Reshut Rabim, of public domain. So in that sense, if you have those space in between those beams, as long as it's in a size of lavud, which is below the 3 handbreadth, so it's all wrapped up as something that it's a public domain, but has a roof. Good question. So they said, they respond to our question. We said earlier that even it's all have a cover area. Rav said that space of that wagon, it's considering a public domain, and you touch a very sensitive point, because you always can come to a point that the wagon can be independent private domain, right? Anyway, mi savart krashim aputayu havu manach lehu. Do you hold that the place of the bean on the weed, so what the way that they place it, achudan manach lehu, they put it on the depth and they put it on the side that it's narrow, and that size have the space, the size of 1 cubit. So again, the space between those lines, the distance was greater. So the way Rashi explained it, that the rows is that it was in such a space that the whole idea of lavud is not applicable, because either they are by the side, or that it was a space between the line that it can go above the lavud. So the GEMARA asks, sof, eventually, ultimately, sumcha de keresh kama have. What is the depth of that beam? So they said, amta, it's 1 cubit. Kama hava motiv, how many lines the Levi was putting on those wagon? Arba'a, which means 4 cubits that occupied 4 out of 5 cubits for the whole length of that wagon. Why? Because we just said that the width was bigger than the weight, which means that if he put it, depend how he put it, but if he put it on the side, in order to make it lower as possible, and the whole size of that wagon, it's a 5 cubit, so it has to be only 4 lines, 4 rows, that the width is altogether 4 cubits. So, and you can make 5. So that's what Rashi said here. So he go to say that if that's the case, Pasha la'amta. So what left? Left only 1 cubit, right? That's the only space between those rows. Kishade leimar beinei uveine. when you distribute 1 cubit between the 4 stacks of beams, kelavud damei. So it's considering lavud. And again, we don't need to repeat many times the definition of lavud, we understand it, right? So therefore that space is considering field. So it's not an issue, because it's in the size of lavud. So they said, Hanicha leman de'amar. Now this statement will go along with what? With one who said, Krashin milmatan ovyan ama. The beams in the tabernacle were 1 cubit thick at the bottom, milema'alan kalin ve'olchin, and they narrowed to the fingerprint, the kerocha ve'etzba, in that size that reach at the top. So because they get smaller and smaller and smaller, because soon you see in the second page, in the second part of this page, that it was a machloket tanaim. It's a different tanaic opinion. It's an opinion that the ovi, the part, the width of those beam, it was 1 cubit in the whole side, excluding the bottom one. So because it's become narrow to the head, so it means that the top, it was only in the size of etzba. Etzba is like a finger breadth. That's the only side. Shapir. So now we can understand that the space between those pieces of wood, it was without a cover, no roof. So anything under that, you considering as a public domain. Why? Because according to that opinion, usually the length of that beam pieces, it was a space of 3 handbreadth and more. So therefore, the whole halacha of lavud is not applicable because it's more than 3 handbreadth. So what did the Rav said? That under those wagon, it's considering a public domain. It means whatever in the opposite side of that one, which means ela leman de'amar. But according to the opinion that said, כשם שמלמתן אוביין אמה, כך מלמעלה אוביין אמה, מה איכא למימר? So the one who said that the adjusters, they were 1 cubit thick on the bottom, the beam were 1 cubit thick on the top, so the space between the stacks is less than lavud, the 3 handbreadths, and the area beneath the wagon, it's basically the status of having a roof and of what? Of public domain. Amar Rav Kahana be'at be'ei. Rav Kahana said, when you're talking about under these wagons, to be a public domain, apply to what? To frames. The frame area, the frame rests on the wagon in order to prevent large load or heavy load from sliding off. So frames like these were on the wagon used for the tabernacle. That's the here I see it in the Koren GEMAROT. So basically the whole idea of be'et ba'ei is that space on the frame. Now Rashi here is a long Rashi, and in that Rashi you have the klomar, and he explained the whole idea of that space. And I urge you, because we're running out of time, to see in my book ביאורי הכלומר ברש"י על הש"ס. I did it many years ago. I tried to elaborate on this Rashi and explain what exactly he meant here when he used the word klomar, because it's a long Rashi, and he deals with the specification of that frame, of that space. Tosfot have again challenged this Rashi, and again it's a long Tosfot. They're all dealing with the space that they have in between, what Rav Kahana meant when he used the word be'et ba'ei, that it was in that now we're speaking about the space of that frame part. Anyway, so the Gemara asks, et ba'ei, Heicha manach lehu. Where exactly they put this frame? Where they place it? Because you have these lines. So how do you have a space for that frame? So they said agaba de agala. You must say, and that's the Geonim opinion, that he put it on the wagon, was the top part. So they said, if that's the case, agala gufa mekora havai, which means the wagon itself was already covered by what? By those beams. So it means that they have already a floor, that it was considering like a roof for a public domain, and therefore, since Rashi said that you have the assumption that that wagon has a floor, the way that we have our wagon, that for example, if you go to development, especially the old-time development, you see people carry those large wagons to have the sands or the dust or whatever they need in order to make the foundation for a building. So therefore, those wagons, when they are filled up and they have floor, so that's considering a roof to a public domain. Even the wagon can be very high in the size, but as long as they have those floors, meaning the spot that you put all the beams pieces, so it's that means that place was already has no space between the beams. So how come Rav said, again we go back to square one, how come Rav said that that anything under the wagon it's considering a public domain? If you tell me Rashi said, and just give you some point of Rashi, there's a klomar here and it's a lot of explanation, but Rashi said, what did the Rav say? That the space between the wagon, it's considering a public domain. We understand that applies to the middle row of those wagons. But when he explained that under that, it's considering as a public domain, now we have a difficulty, because if you tell me that is a floor for those wagons, so if you have a floor, there is already roof. So how come you tell me that that's not even a selavud, but that's considering a public domain, anything that under that roof? But again, bear in your mind the applications that we're speaking about any public domain that has a roof, how we take it. And we back to square one in a sense that if they hold that there's a floor, then it's a whole discussion of space, be'et ba'ei. Now it's knock out the whole idea of space between those beams, and regardless if it's lavud or not lavud, the minute you tell me there's a floor, there is a floor. We turn the page to 98b. Amar Shmuel bi tedot. Shmuel said, wait a second, no, those wagon does not have floor. It was instead a stakes that the place, when they place the beam on the wagon, they have those stakes, which was very narrow, and the Geonim explains that between those stakes it was a large space, so you do not have the deal of lavud. If you look at our times, Rashi said that if you see in the old place that they used to do development and people carry by hand, they have those wagons have a large space between the pieces, and therefore that spot is without cover in the space between them, and we say that that's considering a public domain. So in other words, the spot that they have those stakes itself, it's not considering a uncover. It is cover. The only spot, the space, the large space between the stakes, that's considering a public domain that was not covered. Now we go to the next step. We're dealing now with the beams that was in a Mishkan. So they said, Tanu Rabbanan, the sages teach us, קרשים מלמתן עוביין אמה, ומלמעלן קלין והולכין. Those beams were 1 cubit thick at the bottom, and they narrow by finger breadth as they reach the top. And they said, the source, because they said in the book of Shmot, soon we're going to read Parashat Truma, chapter 26, Yihiyu tamim al rosho. So it means that each one of these beams, Ramban said on the Torah, if you read the Ramban interpretation of Shmot Kavav Kavdalet, Exodus 26, sentence 24, you see the Ramban elaborate that that's applied to each and every one of those beam pieces in a tabernacle. So they have to have tamim al rosho. They have to have together, they were all ended at the top toward a single ring. Ulehalanu omer. And they said in the book of Joshua, chapter 3, in regard to the Jordan River, that Joshua was the emissary to break those. You remember the story when we studied Joshua, that when it was a great miracle when they split again, the Jordan River was split, and the feet of the priest passed by to that Jordan River. So they said, Tamu nichratu. Those who went down to the dead of Arava, the Dead Sea, came to an end. Tam means finish. So here too the beams narrows, they reach the top until they are virtually terminated. So it means that until the width of their head was in the etzba, was in the finger breadth side. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, that's the statement of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Nehemia אומר, כשם שמלמתן עוביין אמה, כך מלמעלן עוביין אומנה, שנאמר יחדיו. Rabbi Nachman said, no, you can't tell me that those pieces of beam were different between the top and the bottom. Why? Because the Torah said clearly the word yachdav, together. So if the Torah used the word together, I, meaning Rabbi Nehemia, understand from my tradition that it's apply that the size that it's a 1 cubit thick on the bottom has to be the same at the top, only 1 cubit thick. So therefore, meaning all those beams, according to Rabbi Nehemia, are equal throughout the whole width. So now the GEMARA asks, if that's the case, v'haktiv tamim, the Torah said the word tamim. So what does that mean, tamim? It means that those beam pieces go in the shipua, in that way up to the top, the way that Rabbi Yehuda said. So it means that it ends up in the size of the finger. So how Rabbi Nehemia said that it's equal together? So the GEMARA responded and said, Rabbi Nehemia explains, Hahu deleitu shlemim velo leitnu denisra. This is different. What the Torah meant is a commandment that Moses said to the Israelites, when you bring in pieces of wood in order to have those beams used for the tabernacle, you should not bring a beam that is made out of 2 pieces. That's the Ran explained, which means he meant to say that each piece has to be perfectly tamim, equal, together. Ve'idach nami. So now we turn around to Rabbi Yehuda and says, how do you explain ve'aktiv yachdav? You said that the Torah said clearly that it has to be together. So if it has to be together, it means that the measurement of those beam pieces has to be equal throughout the length. So how come Rabbi Yehuda said that it's meshupa, it's turning away throughout that beam pieces until it ends up in the size of a finger breadth? So they said, Rabbi Yehuda explained, Hahu de lo li shalchufinhu mehadadei. This is a commandment that Moses told them that they should not put the beam pieces in such a way that one enter and one out, which means he asked them to put it in a way that it's equal and straight, not mixing, just look neat and nice, Rabbeinu Hananel said, all together the same way, not one beam here, one beam there, and not in order. Now, since we said that there is opinion that some of those beams were basically different in their size, so they said Bishlama leman de'amar, that will go good with one who said Keshem shemilmatan ovyan ama kach milema'alan ovyan ama, just as they were 1 cubit thick on the bottom, so the same is 1 cubit thick on the top. Hainu dechtiv. Now I understand what the Torah said in that place in Exodus. They said uleyarketei mishkan yama, in the back of the tabernacle western, ta'aseh shisha krashim, you should make 6 beams, ushnei krashim ta'aseh lemikutzot hamishkan, and you should make 2 beams for the corner of the tabernacle. The Torah said bayar chataim on the back. So what does that mean? So basically Rashi said here that before that the Torah commanded us to make the south part of that tabernacle 20 beam pieces, and the same the wall of the north. Now this pasuk, this line commanded us to make 6 beam pieces to the western wall, and in addition to 2 at the corner of west northwest and 1 in the southwest, to do what? To fill up those corners and make it the whole pieces equal, look equal in each size. That's what Rashi said. So the GEMARA said the ate putya dehane. So because they have that width of this beam, what they do, memalele sumcha dehane, it's filled and come and cover the remainder thickness of those, which means it fill up those spots at the corner of south and north of the tabernacle, which means the GEMARA understand that the space in eternal space of the tabernacle has a length of 30 amot, 30 cubits, and the rochav was 10 a cubit. The Ritva said that was the tradition by the sages. Tosfot said they learned it from the way that the Beit HaMikdash, the holy temple, was, which means that the length was 3 times than the width. That the way the Beit HaMikdash. The Sfat Emet have a lot to say in this. Anyway, Ela leman de amar, but according to the opinion, mil matan, that on the bottom of yan ama. So he said that there were 1 cubit thick at the bottom, and they narrowed to the finger breadth of yan ama, u'milamayalan kalim ve'ochlim ad ke'etzba, So if that it's reached the top, that finger breadth, so it's all a line. High ayel v'high nafik. So now what happened? This beam is in and this beam go out. So those beams of the north wall and the south wall getting to the inside, and those corner of those beams in the corner of the western wall, it's coming out, and because it's coming smaller and smaller and smaller toward the heights, so it means that those pieces of beam of the north walls and the south wall, it was coming close in a smaller size toward the internal part, and the end of that pieces was a line and straight, because that was the end of that pieces. So it means that depend how you look, but in a certain way when you look, you see that it's like moving, it's a corner, it's not fully straight. So now we back to our questions. So he said, how come now you said something else, that it's not really together and it's not equally a line? How? So explain, the shafelehu kiturin. So it means that one pair, the width of the beam, as well as they were slap like mountain, and it means it's not protrude. So because it's like a mountain, what happened to mountain? They have these
tapers.
What? Tapers in both sides. Thank you. And therefore it's not coming out outside. That's what Rashi said. Rashi here is awesome. It's very helpful. Another thing we learn from that Mishkan, the Torah said in sentence 28, והבריח התיכון בתוך הקרשים מבריח מן הקצה אל הקצה, which means the two psukim earlier, the Torah commanded to make a beam, and they have a bar in those beams, that so it's a 2.5 cubits under their heads, and they put in those pieces they line. So now the Torah said that at the middle bar in the midst of the beams shall pass through the end, from the end to the end. So now Tana, one of the sages, taught Benes haya omed. He said that it stood by means of a miracle. That it means that the middle bar have a single rod that can that run along the length and the width of the tabernacle, which means that this middle bar was miraculously bent to the beams in both sides. So again, the Tosfot here and the Meiri and Khatam Sofer have a lot to explain, but it means that even an expert in that, building engineers and structure engineers, they cannot instruct it or make, the builder cannot make it. It has to be a miracle, the way that they hold the pieces. By the way, we said that many things in the wilderness was by miracles, such as the way that they carried the ark was so heavy, so it was a miracle, etc. So now we said, in one pasuk, they said, Ve'et hamishkan ta'aseh eser yeriot. The Torah said, and you shall make the tabernacle with 10 curtains. Orech ha'iriyah ha'achat, 28 ba'amad. The length of each curtain shall be 28 cubits. Ve'rochav 4 ba'amah, and the width of each curtain 4 cubits. All the curtains shall have the same measurement that the Torah said in Exodus 26. So now, Shdei orkayu lefut yad mishkan, which means you take the length across the width of the tabernacle, kama havya 20 utmanei. What is the length? It's 28 cubit. Now, dal asar leigra. If you subtract 10 cubit from the width of the roof of the tabernacle, pshaleu tesha lehai gisa, v'tesha lehai gisa. You have 9 cubit remains on one side, and the other 9 cubit on the other side. LeRabbi Yehuda migalia amad da'adanim. According to Rabbi Yehuda, that he said that you remember we said that he's an arrow that end up in a finger breadth size. The cubit of the socket was exposed, the same as the beam were 10 cubit high, the bottom cubit of the place that hold the socket. LeRabbi Nehemiah migalia amad the krashim. According to Rabbi Nehemiah, a cubit of the beams themselves was exposed. So again, there is a lot of mefarshim here. I have some notes here that what exactly the machloket between them. I think the best here is the Ran and Rabbeinu Hananel that explain how it holds properly. But basically it's like 10, 9, 9, 9. Or the other opinion is like 12, 10, 8, 8, 9. That's the way they hold it. Shdei putyahu leorkan. Shdei putyahu leorkan. Place the width, which means the curtain width, across the length of the tabernacle. Shdei putyahu leorkan de mishkan kama havya 40. How much is the width together? Has to be what? 40 cubits. Dal tlatin leigra. If you subtract 30 cubits from the length of the tabernacle roof, what's left? Pshalehu 10. Left 10 cubits. LeRabbi Yehuda mekasya amad da'adanim. Rabbi Yehuda maintained that the beams narrow to the finger breadth, the curtain hang down at the western side of the tabernacle, and the cubit of the socket was covered. LeRabbi Nehemiah megalia amad da'adanim. According to Rabbi Nehemiah, the cubit of the socket was exposed. So it means that it was open, it's exposed, so only 9 left hanging on those beam pieces in the western part. So therefore all these beams that they have on the bottom, it's megulim, it's open, it's not closed. Those bottom part was closed, which means you have 30 and you have 9, and those corners are empty. Now, since we're talking about tabernacle, we discuss also the curtains. So they said, "Ve'asita yeriot izim le'oel ala mishkan." The Torah said in Exodus 26, "You shall make curtains from goat hair for the tent over the tabernacle." And the Torah said, 11 curtains shall you make them. Orech ha'iriyah achat 30 bama. The length of each curtain shall be 30 cubits. Ve'rochav, and the width of each curtain 4 bama, 4 cubits. Which the Torah ended, each of the 11 curtains should have the same measurement. So now the GEMARA elaborated and they said, Shdei orkayu lefutya de mishkan. If you place the length across the width of the tabernacle, kama havya, how much is the length? Shloshim, 30 cubits. Dal 10 leigra. If you subtract 10 from the width of the roof, now pashalu 10 lehai gisa ve10 lehai gisa, and there will remain on each side 10. So now, LeRabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Yehuda, Mikasya Amada Adanim, Rabbi Yehuda hold that the cubit of the socket were covered. LeRabbi Nehemiah, Migalya Ama Da Adanim. So according to Rabbi Nehemiah, the cubit of the socket were exposed. So Rashi here, when the Bua Matchil here, Ve'asita Yeriot Izim, so he said, Eilu Yeriot Elionot Aprusot Elionot Achtonot Elionot Kurim Oil. So it was the top curtain and the bottom curtain. So now Rashi said Klomar. So I explained in that in my book, Be'urea Klomar Berashi, that when it's come to that, Rashi meant when he used the word Klomar here, when it's come to the top curtain and the bottom curtain, it was two different levels. One, they have the level of the tabernacle itself, which was for beauty and for the ulam, the place of the tabernacle, and at the top it was another one. They have those curtains. It was basically some type of roof on the top of the building. So therefore, I go here to a long explanation of this Rashi, but that's basically the reason that Rashi here used the word Klomar. It's because the way that the pasuk was written, the way the line, the sentence in Torah written, it appear like they have either two separate curtains, one at the top of the others, or two different location of curtains. And Rashi explains that it means, and in a different, in that sense, it's in two different locations. Anyway, back to our subject. So he said, LeRabbi Yehuda, that hold that those beans come and become smaller and smaller, Mikasya Amada Adanim. So only one cubit cover. LeRabbi Nehemiah, however, according to Rabbi Nehemiah, so that's he hold Migalya Hamada Avanim, the cubit of the socket were exposed. Tanya Nameyachi, we also learn in the Braita, the pasuk said, the line 13, the sentence 13 said, Ve'ha'ama mize ba'odef be'orech yiriyot ha'oel yasaruach al tzidei ha'mishkan mize u'mize lechasoto. So because the Ran explains that the Torah meant when they used and the cubit of the one side and the cubit of the other side remained the length of the curtain. So what remained the length of the curtain? It means lechasot ama shel adanim, which means to cover the cubit of the socket. So that's the opinion divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Nehemiah omer lechasot ama shel krashim. So the Ran explained it's covered the cubit of the beams. So how it covered the beauty? So he explained as follows: because it's exposed, those bottom was exposed. So now the Gemara said when it's the western wall of that tent, shdei putyahu leorke de mishkan. If you place the width across the length of the tabernacle, kama havya, how much? 44. It's a 44 cubits. Dal latin leigra. If you subtract 30 for the roof on that halal, on that space in the tabernacle, pasha lehu 14. So what left? 14. Dal tartei lechafla. Subtract 2 for the doubling of the sixth curtain, because it was hung on the bottom at the entrance of the tabernacle in the east wind, east side. Dechtiv, because they said in sentence 10, V'chafalta et ha'iriya hashishit al mul pnei ha'oel, and you shall double the sixth curtain over the front of the tent, and therefore pshalu trei srei. So as you have 12 remain. Now, since that, now how Rabbi Yehuda and Nehemiah explain it? בישלמה לרבי יהודה היינו דכתיב חצי אמה עודפת ישרח על אחורי המשכן. So if according to Rabbi Yehuda that he hold that the beams is narrow to what? To fingerprint. So we understand it because it's written the half the curtain remains shall hang over the back of the tabernacle. So we understand that. But however, אלא לרבי נחמיה מאי תשרח. But according to Rabbi Nehemiah, who maintained that the width of the cover, of the thickness at the top and the beam, it's all equal. What's the meaning of the shall hang? How come the shall hang? So because it's coming on the ground on the size of 2 cubits, that is a half of the yeri'ah, and it's not coming equal. So he explained and he said, Tisrach mechavrotea. It will hang more than the others. So it means that this curtain in 2 cubits longer than the other curtain covering the tabernacle. Tana dever Rabbi Ishmael. So now in the one that is hanging over, that we learn from the Beit HaMidrash, from the school of Rabbi Ishmael, למה המשכן דומה? לאישה שמהלכת בשוק ושיפוליה מהלכים לארץ. It's like if you want to make an allegory for people to understand, so this tabernacle, it's like a woman that walking in the marketplace and her skirt follow after her. You see like the bride, they have the skirt follow after her. So that's the meaning, that the back of the tabernacle follow nigrar al haaretz, the follower. Tanu Rabbanan. So how those match? So they said, חרוצים היו קרשים, וחלולים היו האדנים. So they said that the beams were grooves and the socket were hollow. So the groove were inserted to the socket in order to support the beams. And it said, ונראים, we just turned the page to 99, ונראים קרסים בלולאות ככוכבים ברקיע. And those clasps in the loop, which means that that's the connected piece, the curtain from one to another, that looks like a star in the sky, which means those 10 clasps of the loop, that was the bottom cover of the tabernacle. So it was a 3 different color of curtain, and they connected in 5 to 5. So the GEMARA said in Menachot 43 that those pieces, looks like the stars, that sparkling, like stars in the sky that is sparkling. That's the famous GEMARA in Menachot, and the Ritva here explained that was the purpose, that it looks like it's like a reminder of the stars in heaven. Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 345, as well as the Rambam in Hilchot Shabbat chapter 14, dealing with Reshut HaRabim Mekora, when you have a public domain that it's cover, it's have some type of roof. So the halacha, the legal status of a cover in public domain is not that public domain, and one is not liable for carrying on Shabbat. So that's basically according to opinion of the Rab, because the minutes you have some type of roofing, it's not holding the same category as everything else. Now, the whole discussion here wants to show that the minutes you have this type of roofing, then automatically it changed the status from public domain to private domain.
נפשי אס השם